I'd like to share a bit about my work with VL2. There's a lot of science behind it in our work, and so I'd like to talk specifically about the science and how we learn about how the brain works and how it relates to storytelling. And then I'll talk briefly about what our vision is for the future. I'll talk a little bit about myself as well. I didn't want to start with the explanations. I wanted to show the adventure. It has been an adventure. I'll talk a little bit about myself first. From California, I'm third generation deaf. I was born and raised being exposed to ASL storytelling all my life. And one of my greatest inspirations is my grandfather, who is Eric Malzkuhn. And I want to show a videotape. I think it is very funny. We have a lot of serious ones, but I kind of wanted to start with something interesting and funny. Back in 1938, my grandfather was a Gallaudet student at the time, and they had a literary competition, and he decided to translate a poem, and he did a great job with it. If you know the poem Jabberwocky, my grandfather translated it from English into ASL. It's really a bizarre poem. If you read it into English, it's very bizarre. But if you translate it into ASL, it is on another level. I actually think it's probably more scary in ASL than in English. It is one of my favorites, and I'm just going to show you a quick clip from that performance. A little bit about my background. Grew up in California, and I went to Gallaudet for my bachelor's in communication with a minor in art. And once I graduated, I went and traveled. I lived in New Zealand for 2 years, and that is where I was exposed to teaching sign language and working in the deaf school. I picked up many languages and cultures there, and I really enjoyed that time. And I decided to go back to Gallaudet for my master's in cultural studies with an emphasis on deaf history and the philosophy of language and culture and how we arrive to what we see in society today. And I was offered a job quickly after graduating with my master's. We worked on a digital portal. We did some lit review and printed sign language. There have been a lot of articles since 2008, and now I'm managing the lab. I'm the co-executive support for the media lab. And working with the VL2, the visual learning and language, I really never thought of myself as somebody who had a niche, but liked different things. And I see that all of those are kind of coming together in the VL2 lab. And so maybe some of the students here are thinking about, they're not sure exactly what they'd like to do in the future. They have a lot of different interests, and I just encourage you to pursue all of those. We made a children's book. It's still in the process. We're hoping that it'll be out for publish at the end of the year. But the School of Visual Arts in New York City, we worked with them in collaboration. And for the MFA, we were interested in how digital and art can come together in a storytelling. And I became fascinated through this process. And we believe that it's important to get your feet wet. New things are coming at us every day, and why not try them, make mistakes, and move forward and learn from them? And so that's how I arrived to where I am today. I'm a curious type of person, and I like to try things, explore, and experiment with the language. I want to briefly talk about the science that we look at visual language and visual learning. We're going to call it VL2 for the presentation. It is a science learning center. A large grant from the NSF, the National Science Foundation, was given to Gallaudet for the establishment of this lab for the goal to teach deaf children how to read. And that is happening through visual modalities. And that's important to language learning of the deaf students, and I've been working in collaboration with Dr. Peter Hauser, who I'm thrilled to see is here in the audience today. We have collaboration in his lab, and we are excited for the new partnerships that we are exploring. Through the research findings, now we're figuring out how we can translate that to provide resources for deaf children to use. It's great to understand the research, but how do deaf children access it? Through presentations and publications, that's fine for academics, but what resources can parents benefit while teaching their children the language? I'm the digital innovation manager of this lab, and my job is to take the research and translate it into resources for children. Deaf children have been learning for over 200 years, and I have a question for you. It's interesting that the culture will influence history and the way that people think. Ideology that academics are using and some of the research may not fit what the needs of our deaf children are. As we did a lit review, we found that the research doesn't necessarily match what we are finding is the best way to teach our deaf students. And so, who are those scientists? Who are the leading researchers in history? Do any of them sign? Are they using research subjects who are deaf to create a schema for the research? And that is difficult because often research translates mostly to the medical setting, but not necessarily to society. So when we established VL2, we had a lot of ethical decision making, a lot of conversations with the deaf community. It is really a place to play with my ideals and the philosophy and the values that I've grown up with. And science is changing, and how we can use that science and the research to become tangible. Most importantly, what do our brains say? Are we making assumptions, or are we looking at what the brain tells us and how the best way to teach students are? I think this is the most terrible misconception that a lot of people have, and it has been around for a long time. It's an old belief that you have to be able to speak or hear to be able to learn. Because English or spoken language relies on phonemes and phonetics. So many people had the misconception that deaf individuals would have a problem. How would they be able to learn to read and write when in fact they can? This doctor is not the only researcher talking about these things. She's working in collaboration with many doctors. She is the VL2 science director. She runs a lab called BL2. It's the Brain and Language Lab. We call it BL2. If you look at her website, it's bl2.gallaudet.edu. Her work for the past 40 years has been looking at language acquisition. Back in the 70s or early 80s, she was looking at the question between hearing and deaf babies and how they acquire language. They were about 8 months they should be saying or signing these types of things. And she found that it's exactly similar. But families who are who have deaf children who are deaf. They are developing in the same rate as hearing children, but there are differences with deaf children with hearing families. She's doing some research with a MRA machine as well as some other machines in the medical field, and she is looking at oxygen and how the brain lights up when language is presented to the student. If they are shown ASL, what parts of the brain light up in the subject? And her findings have been interesting without sound. It has nothing to do with sound, rather. The supratemporal, we're going to call it the STG. It's the area of the brain where language input is streamed. And it's not about sound or speech or even sign. It's actually about patterns. And all natural languages have patterns built in within them. Obviously, phonemes or phonetics are what hearing people hear, or how signing is for deaf children, but patterns are what people are picking up when they are acquiring language. So what does that mean for ASL? ASL is rich in pattern. We have hand-shape movement. ASL has its own natural patterns built in, and the brain needs that for learning. And so as children are exposed to that, they can develop easier. However, if they're not exposed to those patterns, then unfortunately they are deprived of that language and that learning, and that might cause a developmental delay or struggles. They're kind of just acting as survivors instead of getting along in life the way people should. And that is still happening today, unfortunately. I'm not here to profess bad news, but I'm just showing the facts that the scientists are finding these, and it's inspiring our work, and it makes us realize that our work is very important. I hope you see the value of it as well. It's a rich resource, and it's still in development. Another example of ASL patterns, my favorite example, if you will, like the nouns and verbs have differences. Not all of them, but often. For example, this is the sign for sit or chair. Sit is just one movement, and chair is two. So nouns typically are two. Airplane, two movements. Fly is an actual one movement. Not all nouns and verbs work that way, but typically that is what you'll find. And ASL is rich with all of these types of examples. I'm just flying quickly to DC, or if I'm flying to California, I change the pattern or the movement of my sign. And ASL is rich in those types of examples. So I briefly talked about the science, but now I'll talk about what led to the development of this app, the Baobab. The how or the reason, well, it is cool, certainly, but wow, the impact is immense. You can see everything on one screen in this app, and the text is there, the video, and it's interactive. It feels like a book for deaf children to experience the reading, the flipping of the pages. Before, maybe you would flip through the pages and then look at mom and dad to sign. Or, now with the iPad, you have the ability to interact with the screen. And there's a lot of transitional opportunity there because the technology is there.
I'm hoping that you have seen the app. Has anyone had a chance to see it? Has anyone had a chance to see the apps? All right, a few people. That's good. You guys can't raise your hand. You guys really need to raise both your hands, actually, because you helped with the app. I want to explain a little bit about Baobab and how the project came to be. As I said, we're going to call it VL2 for the apps for the book, and this is how it's developed. The 4 books that we have developed. We've got additional books coming. So the Baobab, and we've released these books last year. The Little Boy Who Cried Wolf. I don't know if you have seen these apps. We're working on our 3rd and 4th book. We have 3 in a series that we have released. So the Storyteller, we've got different artists involved, and everyone creating this is all deaf. So we have a range of individuals from ASL that are doing the translation. The Baobab was originally created in ASL. A team of collaborators got together and they wrote the script and really thought about how to translate this. The Little Boy Who Cried Wolf. It's a famous fable, and it's our version of it. It's a classic story that we've created to an app. It's a children's storybook, and the little airplane that could instead of the little engine that could. So again, it's our change. It's our input on that famous fable. And then the Blue Lobster. We started with expanding a series, but Baobab, Inga Wang, just a deaf person from China, moved to America, and just very talented watercolor artwork. And believed that science and art must come together. They must intersect. You can't have one without the other. To have science, you have to make it visual. It must be public to the audience, so you have to have art and science together. So it was a phenomenal collaboration. So we worked on this series together, and very soon we're going to be releasing another one. I'm hoping next month that will be released. The Blue Lobster is a for younger children's book, probably age 4 to 7. And it's our take on a group of that age group, because we really believe that young readers need to start at a young age. So the Blue Lobster we did to age 3. It's a pre-reading app. Very simple. The sentences are shorter. And what's interesting about the dissemination of the app is, deaf children really like it, and the parents absolutely love it, because very often hearing parents with deaf kids, they're still learning ASL themselves. They're not actually fluent in it, and they're not always confident in their signing. But when they sit down with this app in their book, they're able to copy the signs that they see demonstrated in the book, and then their son or daughter asks questions, and it's all right there in the app. So it's great for CODAs as well, hearing children with deaf parents, because it's great for a wide audience. So it's not just deaf children with hearing parents. There's a lot of children hearing deaf that really are just learning how to read, and they see the signs. It has a huge impact on a large market. So I'm very proud to say that I've been affiliated with this team here at NTID, led by Dr. Carrie Beam, and at the admissions department at CAT. So you guys have been great, so the 4 of you. We have worked with the Android version and iPad mini. But the Android is what we've been working with. We're very excited to add Apple and Android. Did you all see this postcard? There's a stack of them outside at the registration table. If you didn't get one as you leave this afternoon. It's very exciting. Couldn't mention all the names, but this is some of the stuff behind our original story. Baobab had all these features, and we thought it was a success. And we did receive an award for the design in 2014. So we were winners in Italy under European contest. They look for any design technologically related to making a difference in children and having a positive impact on children. So we submitted it, and we were awarded this, and it was huge recognition, so we're very grateful and proud of that. There's 170 vocabulary words within this one story, and we often get asked, is there voice on this story? Is it accessible bilingually? It's only word for word, meaning that it's vocabulary. Yes, the vocabulary words do have audio sounds, but it may not be The sign has signed fingerspelling, so it's based on the research that we've done. So if you fingerspell it, if you're a strong fingerspelling, it will benefit those students as well, or those children learning to read as well. Because the role of fingerspelling is very fascinating. It's a bridge between ASL and English. Fingerspelling has the hand shapes, the different movements, but it also represents English. Fingerspelling represents English, so vocabulary, if you see that fingerspelled, and children actually learn to receive that and they understand it, so then they recognize the vocabulary and they make the connection between the word and the meaning. So often, fingerspelling is sandwiched between signing and English. For example, it might be bird. So you see the sign bird and you'll look, and then it's fingerspelled or spelled out B-I-R-D, bird, and then it'll be fingerspelled out slowly, letter by letter, and it's signed more naturally. And you see the progression of the hand shapes and the changing. So children learn to recognize that, and they're processing language, and they're actually acquiring the language. Because if you did it slowly, B-I-R-D, children would copy that, and there would not be any cognitive understanding of the word. But if it's signed or fingerspelled naturally, then they get it. So that's an actual fascinating part of language acquisition. And VL2, that's just one example of what we do in all the storybooks. So we make sure that that is a crucial and integral part of the design. We do have some voiceover, like bird will say, here's a sign bird, and it sounds like bird. And then you fingerspell naturally, and you see all the letters. So there's those 3 different features. There's no voiceover during the story. We want them to actually learn the vocabulary words, and that's why we included voiceover. When we started the design, our focus was children. Primarily, we were developing stories. When we developed the stories, we did a lot of research to really understand the science with language acquisition. So we wanted to have a good story to tell. My strong belief is storytelling. I mean, you've got all this science, but if the story is ho-hum, I mean, how do we really get the children attracted and interested? You really needed to hook the children. So what we started with was we did a lot of research. We found storytellers, and we videotaped them. And then we went back to the classroom at Gallaudet University. They have Kendall Elementary School right on the campus. So there's a lot of deaf students there. So we went into a Kendall for second, third grade and did those ranges, and we went in and we showed the students the videos just to see their reaction, to get a gauge of how they did it. And then we went back and tweaked the stories. And they kept asking for more, and it's like, okay, good. We know that they wanted more, so we kept going back to them. You know, we would ask them, do you have a favorite? And they said, yes, we do have favorites. So we really got the students to give us a lot of information as we designed these storybooks. Before we disseminated the app, we let the children play with it. We didn't explain how to use it. They themselves actually figured out by playing with it. They didn't really struggle along with it, but they were able to figure it out on their own. So we watched them, we learned from them, and then went back to the lab and made modifications. There were 3 different modes development: watch, read, and learn. In each section, once the student watched it, it was fully in ASL. It was interesting. Some of the students are like, why? Why do you need it in ASL? I mean, why not just read the storybook? Just read it and then sign it. They say, well, why do you need the vocabulary? And we thought that ASL was crucial because the whole concept behind it was just learning vocabulary words, but you wanted to have that word have a larger meaning, and that had to do with language acquisition. We were talking about the character in the storybook and what the character went through. So we were looking at the big picture. So the big picture, and then the parts that supported the big picture and how they all overlapped and played off one another. So this is how children learn how to read with language acquisition. So they may ask them how to climb. Climb what? So they climb in a tree. So there's a story in the girl with a girl climbing a tree. So you just couldn't say climb because you had to figure out or tell the kids as they read the story what they were climbing. So adding context to the whole story, not just learning the vocabulary. The Boy Who Cried Wolf, 5-minute storybook, and I don't think we've got time to show it, but I'm going to show you a first 1-minute clip. If you haven't seen it, it's great because it's short, it's 1 minute, and unfortunately we don't have time to show you the full story. Justin Jakerman is the signer for this story, and he's from CSUN. I know you want to continue. I know you want to see the rest. I know you're dying to see the rest of that story. I know that caught your attention because everyone was quiet. There's an interesting process behind this whole story. When Justin developed the story, we had a vision of the facts of the story, and there were many different versions of the story, The Little Boy Who Cried Wolf. So we had a meeting. We decided that, all right, you come up with your process and what you believe. And when we filmed him, we did it over several takes. It wasn't just one take. There were a lot of changes and modifications during the taping. But when we actually did it, he knew it was right. And we realized it was right because of the rhythm. The rhythm was natural, it was beautiful, it flowed, it was smooth. And there's another observation we made during the working of this was the flow. There was a flow between the signs and how do you hold the sign and how it floats, and the audience just moves with you through the ebbing and the flowing and the rhythm of the signs. It's almost like pausing. It's like you breathe. We don't really think about breathing, but we do it. And we don't think about the pausing necessarily, but it happens. And it becomes a flow and it becomes rhythmic. And again, as I talk about the patterns, one beautiful thing is about classifiers. Sitting for a long period of time. Sitting, waiting all day. You know, the sheep. I mean, you had the sheep already ready. The base of the classifier was ready. And then the sheep grazing in the grass and how they ate. Everything just flowed. It was rich. The rhythmic flow was just rich. It was fabulous. Storyteller, so it might have been easy for him to craft this. However, but the point is ASL storytelling, what it actually entails. Do we have a place for ASL storytelling in our culture? And a lot of people say, oh, it's a deaf thing, it's very cool. Of course it's cool, but it's much more than that. It's visually rich. It's literary. And to be a good storyteller, you have to practice to get better. You have to know the history. You have to be fascinated with the history and the language to be able to tell a good story. We really want our community values to be shared, and we really need to have and be more demanding of ASL storytellers. My fascination and my new obsession is with epic storytelling. And what do I mean by epic? How a story becomes epic. I've obsessed on this, and I may not have the answer, but I've got a few thoughts on how a story becomes epic. And it feels when it's far-reaching. Just as Justin told the story, you know, how he signs like this, and you just feel carried away, and you're not in a small land, but you're in a vast pasture. And you feel the distance, you feel the space of the world, and it takes you to places that you didn't think you could go to. It takes you out of your realm. That's what epic feels like. You know, when you go to the movie, a cinematographer tends to just pan back, like a person in the mountains, and he pans back and you see the wide horizon. It really is epic. It's timeless. So a cinematographer really has that knack. So our storytelling in ASL is the same thing. You know, there's different techniques, signing slower, more purposeful, you know, slowing down and just purposely signing. Again, the tempo, the rhythm. Yes, there's techniques that we have in ASL storytelling, but to me it's just fascinating to focus on the epic and how it can be bigger, that vastness in the story, and how that is shown in storytelling.
I love philosophy. Growing up, it was odd that I was exposed to philosophy. Maybe I was interested in it. During my master's program, I took a philosophy of language class. And I find it interesting, the discussion in today's society about values and the value that speech and audio is valued over sign language. in education, in society, in the greater systems that we work within. And why did that come about? Well, it started back in Greek philosophy, and that was my first exposure of that idea. And ever since, I've really kind of toiled with that. And I'm certainly not very knowledgeable about it, but I think it's interesting. Looking at Aristotle and his work and how that may create a framework or a structure for storytelling. The writing of prose and poetics and how that changes over time, but the structure and the framework has been carried on since Greek mythology. Aristotle is a great thinker, and I would like to look a little bit at some of his work. I find it still interesting today, since 350 BC, which was Aristotle's time. We can still see that some of these correlate to storytelling. The plot, the emotion, that's where the audience feels connected. They find the empathy or the emotion in it. The character. It might be a reflection of the child reading it. It's a reflection of the action that's happening within the story and the consequences the character may have. Thought, the theme, the concept, the context. Diction is the dialogue. It could be the script, but it could be a signed dialogue, what the characters are saying or the meaning behind it. The song, the rhythm, the patterns that are key to brain cognition, recognizing patterns to learn those concepts. It's interesting that it's been something that's stayed true through the ages in storytelling. And then spectacle, the design, the deliverance. Storytellers are able to make those choices, as well as artists. It's really important to the artist process to make decisions with their style to make a finished product. I do like his framework, but during that philosophy of language, I found that he was wrong. This is not his exact quotation, but basically, this is what he said. The deaf and dumb cannot reason. That intellectual conversation and reason cannot happen. And wow, what a brilliant guy and how wrong he was. Our story, my story, has changed. What we're sharing as a community, I feel like he is very wrong. He is gone down in history. Aristotle is a very famous person, a philosopher, and he is wrong. And we are living proof as the deaf community that in history, culture, society, people are making misconceptions and misunderstandings. And we need to take ownership and tell our story. We need to own those victories through sharing fiction or nonfiction. We have many ways of doing that. We are setting up a new program, and I would like to talk about it. When we were developing our story apps, it was an enjoyable process, and we have a great team. But think about how many children, how many stories need to be told. As I was thinking about that, how we could code something and build a program so that the children could use the code to develop their own stories, make their own films, write their own scripts. And I think it's a huge opportunity for individuals who are interested in app creation, deaf programmers. I think it's a huge opportunity, and we're calling it the VL2 Storybook Creator. Our stories have lots of information, lots of knowledge to be shared, and through those stories we learn. And how we express them, how we affect the future, our future generations, is not just the deaf community. We certainly want to also impact the hearing society, world community as a whole. In Washington, D.C., what we're doing, I play a lot. I develop stories, and we set up the Motion Lab. The reason that we set up the lab is that how can we take a story and make it better? It gives the artist a time to play, to use special effects, to use different digital technologies, and hopefully find new discoveries that will benefit children. We have students involved in the lab. It's an interesting project, and I just brought a few examples to share. One student, Lauren, who's already graduated, during her senior year, we called it the App Zone. She developed an app for the Apple Store. You can get the apps for free. She realized that there were parts of deaf culture that she didn't really understand, and she wanted to develop an app so that people could understand why people bang on the tables to get attention and those types of things. Ben Bahan, who works often with us in the Motion Lab, is developing Leva. It's a presentation performance about how deaf people came to be on the earth. Why are we here? Why do we exist? It's very fascinating. Some of you may have seen it. I see a couple of head nods in the audience. It's an interesting project, and we just actually hosted our first Storyteller symposium where we came together to talk about the relationship between a published text and a sign language performance, and how printed text, written text can control the ASL and vice versa. And so we looked at, even from ASL to other sign languages, how translation may work. And so I believe that we will probably build a symposium and host it on an annual basis. We want to see more ASL literature, poetry, and storytelling. And one place, if you're interested in that, is looking at the Deaf Studies Digital Journal. It's an online resource, and we just released our 4th issue. In total, I think there are about 50, maybe to 80 people contributing to this journal. There are a lot of deaf artists, storytellers contributing. So if you have time to take a look at it, I would really suggest you do so. When I went into the MFA program, my desire was to continue looking for story development and visual narrative and how technology can blend with that. And thought just for fun, I would show you one short piece of work, which I did for my midterm. It's not for children. I think that children might become scared from this piece. But I wanted to explore how much of the sign language you could take away and still understand. It was kind of an interesting experiment. So here we go. I really appreciated being here today. Thank you so much for your time and coming. My email address is printed here on this screen, as well as my website, so feel free to contact me, and I hope that you enjoyed this afternoon. Thank you so much for coming.